Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Quinns. I'm Quentin Smith from Shut Up and Sit Down, and I am joined by none other than Mr. Tom Vasel of the Dice Tower. Tom, it is an enormous honor. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm glad to be here. I'm from the home studio since the power went out at the main Dice Tower studio, but we resisted your virtual attack, and this is our backup plan.
I was going to say, so the storm that I sent to derail this panel didn't work. That's what I'm hearing from you.
It came close to.
Okay, so Tom and I have been talking about this, and I really owe Tom one for joining us, because I published an article about, basically, if you missed it, I was sent some data analysis by a fan of the Dice Tower who
by accident.
It was honestly, this poor person has caused so much drama on the internet, but supposedly by accident, he accidentally compared Tom and my BGG rankings to find out which of us, like, where we deviate the most. And that's fine, but you know, BGG rankings, like, we might have made those rankings a long time ago. We might have, we might not feel the same way. So what Tom and I did before this call is we thought, well, let's do this properly. Let's sit down and have a brief meeting to discuss some areas where we think we actually definitely disagree with each other the most. So what we've got for this panel, for probably about the next hour or a little under, Tom and I are going to be taking turns going back and forth. Each of us have brought 5 things that we want to talk to the other person about. Tom, how are you feeling at the minute?
Friday. And I don't have live stuff going on tomorrow, so I'm great.
I told myself I'm not going to drink during this show, because the last thing I would want is to embarrass myself in front of, I should say, the person who honestly, Shut Up and Sit Down, I'm not sure would exist without the Dice Tower. When I first sort of started getting back into board games when I was 22 or 23, it was watching your videos and listening to the Dice Tower podcast that really kind of ignited my passion, helped me to find games. And in fact, the whole first year of Shut Up and Sit Down, I think we were pretty much just playing stuff that you told us to. So I just wanted to thank you. And on behalf of me and our audience.
Flack for that, though.
You got flack?
No, flack for people said, when I started the hobby, I played everything that you said was good, Tom. And then as time went by, I realized more and more how wrong you were.
Well, just to tease, because we took our cues from you for a long time, and we agreed for a while that Cosmic Encounter was the greatest board game ever made. 5 or 6 years of Shut Up and Sit Down top 100 lists where we would always say Cosmic Encounter is the best game. I have finally now sort of like grown up and left your metaphorical house to the point that Cosmic Encounter is now my 3rd favorite board game of all time.
I believe it's my number 3 at this point too.
What? No, I'm trying to distinguish myself here. And
that's the problem that we had when we were actually getting together to talk about this. Unfortunately, we're more alike than I would prefer.
Yes. But nonetheless, we have discovered no less than 5 things each that we definitely do disagree on. So without further ado or further flattery, although I will thank you one more time for joining us.
It's number 2. Sorry. So you're 1 off.
Okay, what do you want to tell the good people what your number 1 is and not keep them in suspense?
As of January, because it might change, but Le Havre.
Really?
Le Havre is it's an elegant game of, I don't know, it's sheer joy. But don't worry, Uwe Rosenberg's making another version in 5 days. It's called something, and it's about something farming, and it's just like all his other games. I'm sure.
Right, yes. Is that the brewery one that I can't believe it, Le Havre. Wow, this is wild. I would tell the people what my they know that my number 1 is Blood on the Clock Tower, and with any luck, they'll be able to play that.
Oh, I only pick published games.
Hey, okay, yeah. Well, okay, fine. In which case, if we're playing by that rule, my number 1 game, not Cosmic, is something we will be talking about later in this very panel. It's not Blood on the Clock Tower. So shall we get this show on the road? What do you think?
All right. I'm ready.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Glad you're here and wasting your Fridays. But I've seen what's available on Netflix, and you're in a good spot.
I think you're at least wasting your Friday afternoon. I'm wasting my Friday night. So this is...
That's true. It's worse for you.
It's significantly more tragic, yes. And with that, we will begin with I would like to, first off, number 5 on my list, I would like to pick your brain about a little game. I need to check. Oh no, this is so, I literally just, okay, yes, a little game called Ladies and Gentlemen. Okay, so let me give the little preamble on this first. Today, just to head off whatever you're about to say, Tom, I don't think Ladies and Gentlemen is a great game. I don't. But I will stand by a few things we said at the time. I think this is a high quality, well, no, I think this is an interesting team game. And those are two things that I don't think the board game industry has enough of. I don't think it, frankly, has enough of games that I think are genuinely different or interesting. Because if it did, then my job would be a lot easier and we wouldn't be playing stuff that felt like other things all the time. So it's interesting. And two, I don't think the board game scene has enough team games. And with that, I will just leave that and ask you, what do you think of Ladies and Gentlemen?
This is like one of the first times I watched one of your reviews and thought, did they play the same game?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not normally one to pick on theming in games. This one felt more misogynistic than normal. And normally I'm told that I'm blinder to that sort of thing. And when I played this, I thought, I like teen games, but I don't know that I like a teen game where one person kind of yells at the other person.
Yeah.
It felt odd to me, and it felt, I don't know. You know, your review kind of brought me around a little bit, and then I thought about it, and then I realized I was right. But
should we mention for people who haven't played this game, because it was not enormously popular at the time. It's definitely
is.
Yeah, exactly. There's no way it's in print now. You'd be lucky to even find a secondhand copy, maybe. But it's a team game where half of the table represent the. Oh, this is going to sound super misogynistic when I describe it, but
this is on your court, okay? Just remember.
I know. I'm gonna.
Who's for this one?
Well, look. I don't even. Look, I think all I'll say is I think this is better than you, and I've already said why, and now I'm just digging myself a hole. Basically, this is a game where one half of each team represents the husband, who plays, by all accounts, a pretty poor quality real-time stock acquisition game, which is just grabbing tiles. But you make money, and then you have to give that money to your spouse, who is the other member of your team. And they play this kind of action selection game to go to shops to buy costumes, because there's a ball coming up in 7 days. And at the end of 6 rounds, you go to the ball, and whichever woman has the nicer costume wins the game for their team. Now, what I describe probably definitely sounds misogynistic, but what we said in the piece, I've realized now, for my opening gambit for this panel, I'm just already defending myself. I'm already on the back foot. This is horrible. I'm going to be moving us on as fast as possible. Basically, for us, we felt at the time that it wasn't misogynistic because it was skewering these gender roles. It was forcing players to inhabit very toxic roles, very toxic traditional Victorian gender roles, in a way that didn't flatter them necessarily. Like, the men in the game, we thought were kind of like groveling and nervous as they had money hoovered out by their wives. And the wives only cared about, you know, they didn't care how much money the husband actually had, because that money was used by the husband to reinvest in their game. They just knew they needed a dress today. I remember laughing a lot, and I don't think that it was presenting these gender roles as like who you should, how anyone should act. It was just trying to be silly.
I agree. And in fact, I remember the first time I played this, I said, I'm going to play the female side of things, you know, just because I want to. And then I played it and I was really uncomfortable because I thought I could lean into this, but how do I do so without being rude to women in general? And I think that just threw me. And then when I took all that away, the game sucks.
Look, here's what I'm going to say, Tom. 2 bad halves of a game sometimes make an interesting experience. I mean, I almost said look at Root there, but that would be rude. But I do think that simple, lower quality games can come together in a kind of weird asymmetric. Let's move on. I don't basically.
Sure.
I think
so we talked about misogyny. Let's do the avarice now.
Okay, great.
So we'll jump to the city of joy, Las Vegas, which is also a game. And this one, there's actually several games with this title, but this is the Knizia one, I believe. Isn't that who designed it?
I think it
no,
might.
it's not. It's Stefan Dorn, I believe. You know what? Maybe I'm just making it up. I will find out for sure.
Yes,
Because
Stefan
Rudiger Dorn.
Dorn. Rudiger,
No,
yeah,
Rudiger Dorn.
that was my first choice as well.
Now, this is one actually that I initially thought was okay. Partially because it was nominated for the Spiel des Jahres, partially because, whenever I hear something's amazing and then I play it and I was like, wow, this is too simple. But the more I played it, the more I realized this gave me the thrill of gambling without the sadness of losing all your money and having your wife leave you over it, which I think she would be more inclined to do instead of the game of Ladies and Gentlemen. But maybe we could play these back to back. I could play Las Vegas and then go to my wife and say, I don't have any money.
I think that Las Vegas, we skewered on the site, and it's quite a well-liked game, and it's certainly just been republished, right? So I think where you and I
in a deluxe version.
Yeah, yes, which I think I actually did quite want. I looked at it and thought it looked a bit sexy, but I can't remember.
It's not.
Okay, cool. So this is a very straightforward, very simple dice game, and I'm definitely. And what you're saying here is that this is good, and you found it rated on my BGG ratings very, very low, and we skewered it in our review. Here's the thing, Tom. I'm immediately going to throw my hands up in the air and say you're right and I'm wrong on this, because since we published that review in 2012, I think it's probably fair to say that a lot of people, when they start their board game careers, they want big stuff, complicated stuff, heavy stuff. They're blown away by all the things you can do in board games. But eventually, when you sort of mellow out a bit, you realize that simple games, straightforward and card and dice games, even trick-taking games, that kind of thing, can be, I don't know, absolutely thrilling. And I think the sheer simplicity of Las Vegas turned me off in a way that was not fair to the game. But
is this an apology video? Because I'm starting to feel like we're...
Basically, I'm hoping that I'm gonna play harder ball later.
Okay.
Because currently, or let's just say I'm giving you these points because my article didn't give you the opportunity to reply initially, and so now I'm ceding some ground and being like, you know what, Las Vegas.
You wrote an article? I'll have to read that later.
You know what? You should, but you shouldn't read the comments or any of the social media around it. That would be my advice. Sorry about that.
Got it.
Let's move on
article.
to. No. Don't you know what? Just skip the whole thing.
Comments.
Let's move on to something you and I. Wait, no, I was going to say agree on, but this is.
It's not that wrong video.
Okay, my next game is Ticket to Ride, and here's where I think you're wrong, Tom. Where I think you're wrong is that Ticket to Ride is a good. I think Ticket to Ride is a good game. That's the end of that sentence. How good a game do you think Ticket to Ride is?
I think Ticket to Ride is one of the greatest games designed in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
So we're close.
Okay. Here's my problem with Ticket to Ride. I can't argue with its success. I think it's beautifully simple.
Well, I'm not ever going to use success as a barometer of good.
Okay. This is just
Monopoly.
So you, given all of the games that exist in the world, an evening spent with Ticket to Ride, you would be like, that's swell. That's a great evening.
Well, never. An evening with any game is not good. Let me look at my list here. I believe I have this as 28.
28 best game
of all time. Well, as of January, of course, things will change. But sometimes you need a comfort food.
Mm-hmm.
And, for a lot of people, that's been some sort of card game, whether it be bridge or hearts or things. That's been that way. Ticket to Ride is essentially Rummy fleshed out into a board game.
Yeah.
And I love it because it works. There's three reasons. I think one is that newcomers are really, really enamored by it. And two, I think on a high level, it works well. And if you don't believe me, I'll whoop you at it. And three, my wife and I have had such a good time with it. And it's hard. And that's a good argument for me to make, because it's hard for you to argue against the joy and nostalgia of my marriage and wonderfulness.
I wouldn't dream of arguing that your marriage is anything other than blissful, Tom. What I would say is, wouldn't those evenings with your wife be better if you, if you wanted to just play that relaxing card game? Because I get it, and I was with you, and still kind of am. But if you want to have that evening where you just sit down with someone and play cards, wouldn't it be better if you and your wife could sit closer because there wasn't a huge board full of plastic trains in between you? Wouldn't you rather play one of the world's best card games as opposed to a solid card game with just this big distracting thing?
Oh, well, that's because while it's relaxing, we also need some space in between us because the knives come out.
Ah, okay.
Ticket to Ride is both peaceful and I will stab you if you put your trains there one more time.
I think Ticket to Ride's too mean to be that relaxing. I find Ticket to Ride quite stressful.
We have a tumultuous relationship.
Okay, perfect.
We get along swimmingly, and that's because Ticket to Ride is where we take it out.
Wow, I think what I'm discovering is you use board games to work out your aggression with your wife, whereas I use board games as a romantic kind of aid to get me closer to my partner.
Now, I don't even know what that means.
Okay, well,
in fact, I'm always amazed when I read on the internet, people have said, we invited this couple over and they were helping each other in the board game, and I'm confused because I was under the impression that spouses were supposed to just ruthlessly attack their spouse at every chance they get.
Right. Like oh God, my wife and I are the most, well, I'm not going to win, but I will absolutely take you down with me. Can you imagine helping your spouse in a board game?
No, I save that for real life.
Okay. Do you want to move on to your game number 4?
I feel like I'm really getting close to the cliff here. So, all right, my number 4 is Arcadia Quest. Now,
Here we go.
I already know where you're going to go with this. You're going to say, take the miniatures away and there's no game. And I feel like there is a little bit of truth to that, okay? To say that miniatures don't add anything to a game is being disingenuous because aesthetics certainly help a game. I like this game anyway. I'm not a big fan of chibis. I'm still confused how a head can be 1/3 of a body mass. It confuses me every time I look at them. And then people say they're cute. And I just think if I saw that in real life, it'd be grotesque and problematic.
Oh, it'd be terrifying. Can you imagine?
Yeah. So, and I would feel really bad for the person, but they're like cute. Anyhow.
Well, they would be dragging their head behind their body, because they couldn't carry. So they'd be walking, but the head would be being dragged. It would be distressing for everybody.
Many, many heart attacks. But I like this game because of the interaction between the players. There's a lot of dungeon crawlers out there. There's a lot of games where you stab other people. This seems to bring out such a balance between each. I can tell stories and stories of this game. I remember Rodney Smith stabbing me in the back in this game. The nice Rodney Smith from Watch It Played, who everyone likes and is just dead wrong on. He's an evil man. And I remember when that happened, and that was a great time. And I remember each of these games. I remember playing with my daughter and just having this back and forth interaction. And this game evokes a story in me. The miniatures certainly help that. And it has fun chucking of dice, but it also has some interesting decisions to make.
Yeah, I guess I'm
going to use my family, I think, in everything to defang you.
I mean, yeah, it's not going to be totally successful because what I'd say is like, yeah, okay, I'm sure there are at some point in Arcadia Quest interesting decisions. I'll be honest, I kind of want interesting decisions. That's like the baseline for what I want pretty much every single turn from a board game. If I start my turn and there is not an interesting decision to be had, which I do remember because I only played this game once easily in like 2013 or something, or 2014, or I played several games of it of an evening. And I just remember so many turns which were that kind of, the scenario had forced me to be like, well, there's only one thing I can do in this circumstance, move forward and hit a monster. And this is really testing my memory because it was a long, long time ago. But I don't remember being faced with choices and with puzzles. I just remember the game kind of happening to me. Does this sound familiar?
Sure. That's new players will often think that. But once you get better.
Oh, is that it?
Better.
Oh, okay. I'm just not good enough. I didn't realize that was an argument we could use. I'm going to use it immediately now in my next game, which is Flam Rouge. Okay. Now, right, I've been being polite up to this point, but listen, Flam Rouge, which if you're not aware, is a race game designed by Asger Kranrud, which is a name I still can't pronounce despite practicing for literally 15 minutes. at a convention in Denmark a couple of years ago. Flam Rouge is a simple card game with a board, basically similar to Ticket to Ride. It's primarily a card game, but with a board. Now, I think, and working in Tom's favor here is most of the internet, I believe, agree that Flam Rouge is good, not great. But Team Shut Up and Sit Down believe I think it's our favorite race game, full stop. I think it's in my personal top 10 games ever made. I think for me, it's like Ticket to Ride is to you, where it's just the flow of it feels magnificent. I love every turn in Flam Rouge, and I find it so exciting. I find it so simple, and it's one of those family games that I can teach anybody and still have a great time. Talk to me, Tom. What's wrong with Flam Rouge?
Well, I was going to look on my top numbered list here to see where it was, but we only have an hour, so I don't have time to scroll down that far. But no, this is one that I am willing to concede that it's me, which hopefully Bonagor doesn't hear. When I played it, I said, you're just switching positions, which I do realize is pretty much all any race is. And this abstracts it out more blatantly than other ones do. I think for a racing game, I need a bit of a thrill. This doesn't have the thrill for me. And yes, that thrill could be rolling dice, flipping a card, whatever it might be. Top racing game, really?
Okay, Tom, listen. Here's what it is. People don't realize this about Flam Rouge, but we have been lucky enough to play with the designer, which allowed us to confirm our theories. It is so much meaner than you think it is, because the penalties for screwing up in Flam Rouge, which is, taking an exhaustion card into your deck, or slipstreaming, so everyone else behind you gets pulled up one space and gets a free move, basically. But the game is so tightly balanced that you wouldn't notice it unless you're really looking for it. But whether you have enough cards in your deck to push you over the line before or after someone else, 1, 2, or 3 spaces that you've given up or taken during the race will make the difference between you coming first or fourth or fifth. And as soon as you know that, or if, I don't know, for me, I guess I was just intelligent enough to notice it like immediately, the whole game from turn 1 is tense and terrifying. Because
you're right, you are using the same argument I did in Arcadia Quest.
Just sneaking it in there. But seriously, every turn of Flam Rouge is tense for me, because if I lose or gain 1 space, that brings the end that much closer or further away to me. And I'll just continue rambling for one more thing. There was a weather expansion for Flam Rouge, which I was disappointed by when I first read about it, because its effect on the race is so minimal. But when I actually played with it, and there was some rain that was like halfway through the race, which meant we all wanted to get into the rain first because you can fall over. But what that meant is that having rain on 1 tile of like a 14 tile race meant we were all playing differently from the beginning, because that was like a checkpoint that we all knew we wanted to be at the front of the pack for. So 1 tiny tweak can change the play of the whole thing. Reminds me of like trick-taking games or something, where it's just sort of
okay.
Only
it's a good way to sell it, actually.
It seems so minimal that the game just almost doesn't exist. But if you kind of can grok the strategy if you can grok how finely balanced it is, you realize that the decisions are a lot more interesting than they seem.
I can see this. It's been a while since I played it. I would say I would try it again, but we all know that that's probably not true with the many games that are out in the market, but you never know.
But that's the really sad thing about this list is, given infinite time, you and I would be able to go back and play these things that one another big up. I definitely am going to find the time to play Las Vegas again, because
this is what I recommend. If all publishers could stop making games for 2 years, we could all catch up and get, of course, then we would probably both be out of jobs.
I have a better idea. What if there was a year where the publishers kept making games, but where you and I really struggled to meet up with people and play them? How would that year go? Oh, wait, that's...
Did you say this earlier this year? Because if so, I have a problem.
Should we move on to your next game?
Yeah. All right. Okay. Oh, oof. All right.
Here we go.
Let me bring the people in here. How dare you? Wingspan. Wingspan, the game that shook the world, that told people zombies and trading in the Mediterranean were not the most important things, that we can look at the beauty of birds and build an engine and take a female designer to the top spot of not just Board Game Geek, but every convention. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say except
I don't think you.
my dogs.
Oh, if your dog could.
My dog's with me.
If your dog could come into frame, I don't know if that can happen, but I think that would Twitch chat.
Oh, maybe I'll bring her at the end. I don't know. She disappeared. I keep telling my daughter to come in and get the dog.
Oh, okay.
The dog loves me for some reason.
Okay, Wingspan. The fact that what was it, 2 years ago or whatever? The fact that the Board Game Geek hotness was filled with this beautiful game, female designer about birds was amazing. It continues to be amazing. It's like it's such a restorative moment that like really it didn't. I think it made a lot of people in the board game industry feel proud of the industry again. You know, like there can be so much toxicity and so much unpleasant masculinity and like men's like boys club-iness of the industry. So it was exactly what we needed. And I'm sure Elizabeth Hargrave is awesome. I think Mariposas is with Matt at the minute, so I'm excited to see what her next game is like. None of this means I have to enjoy Wingspan.
It is required. There's a checklist behind the scenes for all board game personalities.
I mean, it feels that way a little bit. Like, I honestly feel guilty that, like, especially because never mind the fact that I want more women designers in the industry, I love birds. You know, people know this, but my stag party before I got married was a trip to see some birds. We went hawking. Yeah, we went hawking, and
that makes me feel worse. I was at a pizza parlor.
Really? Was more pizza like?
I ordered one with every topping they possibly had, including anchovies, since I had never had them before. I said, well, I'm just going to do this. That's all I remember.
Matt likes to feed me anchovies in his cooking, but he knows that I'm fussy about fish, so he'll cook them really small. Then they dissolve, and then they just add like a salty.
So bird watching. Did you see any birds?
Well, I'm sure. No, it's pretty difficult.
Or was that code for something else?
I promise it was not code for. Despite the fact that birds can mean women in England. No, we just looked at some nice birds. We saw some desert hawks. It was hawking. So we're getting distracted. The point is, I don't have to like Wingspan. Actually, this kind of ties into. Let's kick this conversation down the road a little bit, because I think what I would say about Wingspan is also what I would say about your number one kind of problem with me. Like your number one thing that we disagree on, that you will bring up at the end of this. I'll choose to defend my feelings on Wingspan then, if that makes sense.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, well then I will bring up my next game, which I think is great. It's one of the games that really it felt like it ticked every possible box for me. I love it. And that game is Mysterium. Now, how do you feel about Mysterium, Tom?
You know, I wanted to like it, and I don't.
Cast your mind back to whenever it was, and it first came out, and it was that weird Ukrainian, I think, game.
Poland.
Was it Polish? I think who were the designers from? Not Poland, I don't think.
Oh, well, I thought it was a Polish company. I thought Portal was the first to put it out, and it was almost like this badge of honor. Like, look, we found this old game that no one else has and that you can't get anywhere else. Alternate names. I'm looking for them. Alternate names. I don't remember what it was first called, but it was called something else.
Yep.
Oh, yes. It re-implements attachments.
Mysterium was initially published as MICMEPIYM in Ukraine. So
I stand corrected.
I would be proud, but that's an incredibly dorky thing to
No, that's a board gamer, man.
Thank you. I'll tell you, it's only because I actually have this personal theory, Tom. I don't know if I've told it to you, but I think the best board games in the world are designed by every country that shares a border with Germany, but not Germany itself. My favorite board games. I mean, this isn't quite.
That does cut out half the world, so I'm not sure.
I mean, it also doesn't. I don't think Germany and Italy share a direct border, but I think Italy, Poland, Ukraine, France, Sweden, Denmark. Just like if you draw a ring around.
I do like those French games.
Those French games are good. But we're sticking with Ukraine. So Mysterium, you wanted to like Mysterium. So what I was saying is like, because what was that? We just had Dixit, and then Mysterium was the next game in that oeuvre, and like it just felt like even then you weren't impressed.
I think, and this is going to come as a surprise to a lot of people who know me, but I like to talk occasionally. And this game is about not talking. And I'm not necessarily always a huge fan of this melding of the minds, as the mind also I found to be okay.
Oh, the mind, the card game.
Yeah, then that's kind of the way Mysterium is. It's like, here's a card. You know what I want. I'm not going to tell you. I would rather be clever with even if it's a few words like code names.
Yeah.
Or again, Dixit. I love the idea of a clever phrase in Dixit that someone else at the table knows exactly what you're saying. And no one else does. But me just giving you a card and looking into your eyes and soulfully, I don't know.
Yeah. That's fair. And there are problems with Mysterium. There are ways to, like, if your group gets into a meta where it's like you predominantly use colors, that kind of thing, which I think is why there's less colors in Mysterium Park. But weirdly, I'll admit this. One of the things I really like about Mysterium, when you talk about talking, I like getting people around my house. I love teaching games, obviously, and I love talking about them. But for me, I also get a lot of social anxiety. So Mysterium, I kind of represents my perfect game night in that I want to bring people over. I want to be the host. I want to teach them the game. I want them to sit down, and then I want to be able to not talk. Yeah. But just be, it's literally. But then just be surrounded by that like board gamey feeling. My friends are talking, they're having fun, and I don't have any responsibility to do anything except hand people a card. I also love the theme. I think, how many horror games are there? How many zombie games and ghost-related games? I guess there aren't tons of ghost-related games, but Mysterium for me is like horror done with like so much love. I really, really love the art of both versions of the Mysterium, the French and the original.
I like the art for sure. That I won't argue with. It's great.
Well, so I think that's a fair amount of stuff to say about Mysterium. Do you want to move on to your game number 2?
I do, but I like to stand a far distance away and just poke at this from a distance. Okay, so this particular one is because of you. Because you all talked about this game so much. I never played it. And that's Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. I never even touched the game. It just never crossed my radar. It was already out of print, blah, blah, blah. And so you all said this was an amazing, fantastic game. I take your word as gospel.
That's very kind of you and your first mistake.
I got a copy of this and we played it. And then I also played the follow-up Cthulhu version of it. But
that was bad. Yeah, we reviewed that, I think.
But there's a few problems I have with the game. The first, which is a retrospective thing, is I believe there are so many games that do the same thing better now, specifically Chronicles of Crime. And also escape room games give me that same kind of feel. But going back to Sherlock Holmes, I love the concept. I love unfolding the map, trying to figure things out, finding the clues, talking to people. The ancient technology of flipping through the book and going back and forth wears on me a bit. This is one of the times where I think modern tech just does a little bit better and also doesn't let me see a picture on a page I didn't mean to see. But I promise you the number one thing is the insufferable, arrogant, pain in the neck liar, Sherlock Holmes himself, who no matter what you do, shows up at the end of the game and is like, oh, that's what you did? Well, that's fine for an amateur. This is what I did. And then gives you some random way he solved it, which I just guessed, and he's like, well, you should have gone to 43. Oh, okay. And I knew that. How? I don't know.
Do you mind if I do exactly one swear on this panel?
Well, it's your show.
Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you right now. I agree. Sherlock Holmes in the Consultant Detective games is full of shit. Like there's absolutely no way I think some and not all of the puzzles in Consultant Detective are bad, good or bad, whatever. They're a mixed bag, but I think I've never finished one. And when it's done that Sherlock Holmes parlor room scene of like, well, how did you solve it, Sherlock? You ass. When he says how he did it, I never think...
maybe I've said something similar.
Yeah, I've never said like oh, that's clever. I just go, what? You know, and I say that in the review, in my original review of Consult Detective, I say like, it lets you feel like the police do when Sherlock solves something and says it was elementary, and you're like, no, it's not. God, but the writing of so much love goes into the case and the puzzle construction of Consultant Detective, and they do not put nearly enough love into how Sherlock solved it. You know, and I think it's a game with underwhelming endings.
I actually think I like the TV show less now because when I see it, I'm like, there's that guy. I hate him. But I think that's just part of it. And that's almost a joke in a sense. But I still felt like it feels dated. And that's my biggest problem. I think Chronicles of Crime feels more rich and story inducing.
Yeah, and I was really ready for Detective, a modern crime board game, to offer what Consultant Detective did, but better, you know, but updating it, because Consultant Detective is one of those games like Tales from the Arabian Nights, where it came out in the 80s, and it's like, it's so incredible how much effort went into that thing, and it's so unique and weird. But yeah, it's the question of when does a classic in the 80s that you've been holding up for, in Shut Up, Sit Down's case, that you've been holding up for ages, sort of, when do you look at it with new eyes and go, actually, it's aged a little bit now, it's dated a little bit now. I do
think if I had played it 20 years ago, my feelings might be very different. I think it could possibly be one of my favorite games.
Yeah, I think, you know, Mysterium for me and Sherlock Holmes Consult Detective do have something in common where I find the theme kind of transporting. Like I'm definitely guilty on Shut Up and Sit Down of being really arch about people who like themes to do with, you know, generic sci-fi or fantasy, and you know, we find that so boring. But for me, like, if I'm really honest, you know, being a ghost in Mysterium in that spooky manner, I love that. And unfurling the newspaper in Sherlock Holmes Consult Detective, I only ever play that game with like either tea or whiskey or something, you know, just to sip while I'm looking at my newspaper. If Sherlock Holmes Consult Detective didn't have the newspaper, I don't know how quick I would be to recommend it. I think that newspaper does a lot of heavy lifting.
I think the newspaper is the best part of the game, except that it drives me crazy because I will look through that newspaper and wonder if every article has anything to do with what I'm talking about.
Oh, it's maddening. The first time you do a Consultant Detective case and realize that one of the clues was in a previous newspaper. Did you know that? Like,
yes, but that I find that more problematic than not realizing that, because I'm looking at it, and I think at the end of the day, the guy said, we have this inch left, put an advertisement there for a new men's suit. And I'm looking at that saying, I know they're going to use that somewhere. That's got to be important.
It's definitely it's a maddening game. It's a weird game. And I think, and Shut Up and Sit Down likes Chronicles of Crime. You know, we like the cases in that, like Consultant Detective, are hit and miss, but I think Chronicles of Crime is great. So does Matt, who did our review for this, it's great. It's unexpected. Have you played any other fan-made cases for Chronicles of Crime? Or like, no?
I have not, but I'm currently working on one.
Really?
Well, that's because we got some characters that were in the game. So I plan to kill myself somehow, some way, or to get killed. We'll see. Maybe I won't.
Speaking of people plotting to kill you, I think it might be time for me to reveal my number one thing that I think you're the most wrong about.
He's about to say reviewing. This is going to be a tough thing.
I would.
Podcasting.
Honestly, like,
wardrobe.
Come
on, I've heard them all before.
Before we move on to the number one games that we disagree on, I will just say, your format of doing reviews, of just like walking you through the components with the component front and then talking about the game afterwards, I find so useful. I mean, like maybe the Twitch chat will tell you like they agree. I think your format is probably more useful for just quickly getting what you like or don't like about a game and understanding the game than ours is, because obviously ours meanders all over the place and has mid-review turnarounds and all this stuff, and we try to do reviews of a piece. I think your reviews are great, and I really appreciate them, and I still use them.
Well, I appreciate that. So I will say in kind that the first time I showed my wife one of your videos, she said, if your stuff looked like that, I would watch it.
Wow. What's your wife's name?
None of your business.
Okay, the number one thing that I think you are the most wrong about is something I teased earlier, because it's now outside of Blood on the Clock Tower, my number one game of all time besides Cosmic Encounter, and that is Tigris and Euphrates by the great Ryan Knizia. I don't know if you've heard about this game, Tom. It came out in the 90s. It was pretty popular then. It's had a bunch of new additions. Asmodee can't seem to decide what they want to publish it under now. But you and I disagree on this because I think this is one of the greatest board games ever made. And when you and I were talking before this panel about where we disagreed, you told me, what were your exact words? That you think it's a game of its time?
Well, no, it's a game. I'm very roller coastery on this one. I believe when I first played it, I hated it. And then a year later, I rated it an 8. And then a year later, back down to a 4. And I kept going up and down on it. Part of that was it was one of the first online games I played, Board Game Geek. I don't know if you remember that. They implemented it way long ago where you could play other people in it. I then learned to play
on Board Game Geek.
Yeah, this was over like 15 years ago now. And I also learned that playing it 2 players was an incredibly different experience than playing it 4. I think the more I play it, the more I like it. Until I attack you, the game is on the line, and I have 4 blue tiles, and you have 5.
For no
inexplicable reason, you just happen to have them. And at that point, I want to throw the game into the bin.
Yeah.
And I say, you know what? I hate this game.
So here's the thing, though. I mean, now we're just getting into a whole conversation about the joy of, the purpose of randomness and excitement. Because, yeah, I this year I've done videos on chess and Go, both obviously games without a random element, except if you include whether you do or don't see certain plays. But I think that what you're describing is actually something that Ryan Knizia is really good at. And Shut Up and Sit Down is so guilty for the first 5 years of just like looking at his work. Looking at his work and sort of making fun of it, because in our defense, the man has made like 700 games, of which not all are good, to put it lightly. And we just saw him putting out games that we didn't like. And then eventually we got to his classics because they were all republished, which is lucky for us. And then we found out they were amazing. But what Ryan Knizia is so good at is he makes games that are so intelligent. Like, if you do or don't like his games, the skill ceiling is certainly really high for how simple the rules are.
Many of them, yes.
Yes, and he also makes some of the dumbest games ever published.
Yes.
But that's the joy of the man, is that he can exist on that spectrum. But what I was going to say is that he makes games which are so hard and with such a high skill ceiling, but he doesn't make them like games of perfect information. He adds exactly what you're describing, that random, like the randomness. You know what I mean? And I think for me that, like, if it wasn't for that randomness, if it wasn't for that grit in the system, Ryan Knizia would be a great, intelligent, superb designer. But in making perfect games and adding grit, I think he's a genius.
Do you like randomness? I'm telling you, I don't know what it is. It's just those moments in that game.
They feel because we just played this again recently because we wanted to show Tom our new hire. But those moments you're describing feel horrible when you plan a good attack and you're like, okay, 75% chance I'll do this, and it just doesn't work, and you lose so many points. And I think the reason it's okay is that you tend to have several of those battles in a game. You tend to have enough of those battles that the randomness comes out in the wash. Maybe.
Here's the thing. I would fight to the death that this is one of the best designed games ever. I think it belongs in a Hall of Fame. I think there's no other game like it, not counting Yellow and Yancy, which is the follow-up. It's completely unique, and it's probably his greatest achievement.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I have to like it.
Oh, yes. Good. No, I absolutely respect that 100%. I'm really looking forward to the final discussion we have to have. So do you want to introduce that?
Here we go. My number 1 is Dominion Clank Understone, or deck building genre as a whole, which started with Dominion, of course, in 2008, I believe, took the board gaming world by storm. It's calmed down now. Now a couple come out a year, but for a while there, if you weren't making a deck builder, you weren't trying. There's something about this that as soon as I start playing one of these, my brain clicks into motion. I start collecting things and building things. And when I'm done, I have a beautiful deck that did not cost me $1,800 buying singles. Tell us why you dislike this beautiful mechanism.
I love deck building. I love to build decks in games such as Dominion and I don't know, other deck builders. What do I like? I like Trains by Hisashi Hayashi.
Yeah, that's just Dominion with a board.
Yeah, I need the board. I need that. I need the deck building to be in service of something. I mean, Flam Rouge is kind of a deck deconstructor. Same thing of just you're not putting cards into your deck, you're taking them out. I like deck builders. The games that I specifically wanted to bring up, Clank and Thunderstone.
Amazing.
Okay, fine. Those are this is, you remember I kicked Wingspan down the road and wanted to bring that into this as well. Because Wingspan for me, the reason I don't like Wingspan is the same reason that not all deck builders click for me, because the way you get birds in Wingspan and the way you build a deck in Clank, to me, sometimes feels like those games are leaning on the psychological, like the dopamine hit of getting cards, of getting an engine, of getting stuff. You know, in Clank, I got that cool card, or in Wingspan, I got an Albatross. And I think those games can lean on that stuff so much that sometimes there isn't even that much of a game there. Like, and I felt this so acutely when playing Clank for the first time, because how many times do you actually cycle your deck in Clank? How much does the deck you built really feel like something that's like around your neck that you're stuck with? Because I think it's barely at all. I think Clank uses, and Thunderstone as well to a lesser extent, but I just feel this way about so many deck builders, except for the very, very best ones, that the deck building is so satisfying that designers can just use it to prop up a really underwhelming game. I
thought Clank added a really fun game to deck building and made it more of a game. Maybe you don't like the push your luck aspect of it.
I like push your luck. Okay. You know, I think on paper, I really like Clank's design in general.
Wait, you didn't like Las Vegas? I see gambling. That's what I meant.
You think I don't like gambling? I like. Okay. You know, here's what it is, Tom. Here's what it is. I like gambling. Let me think. Let me. I just did a series on called Card Games That Don't Suck on Shut Up and Sit Down, in which I was looking at all card games you can play with a 52 card deck. I bought Reiner Knizia's book on dice games. I love stupid gambling. I love Ink and Gold. What I don't like is gambling combined with game mechanics that make me feel like I should have a sense of control. Like, okay, so I love the idea of Clank of get into a dungeon and then get out, push your luck. What I don't like is the idea that whoever gets out first did that because they somehow built a good deck, when actually all the deck building in that game is just like chrome and fluff. Like, Wingspan has a ton of luck, but it sort of gets framed as this engine build, this, enormously intelligent engine building game, when the reason I published a negative review of Wingspan is I had too many games of it where what I wanted to do I felt denied that opportunity. So I think.
So do you like Race for the Galaxy?
I love Race for the Galaxy is easily in my top 10 games ever. But I think a good Race for the Galaxy player is able to overcome a bad deal.
No, that I agree on, and I think people who aren't good at Race for the Galaxy miss that sometimes. So if we can get back to our snooty ways. I don't think you're wrong about Clank and Wingspan in that regard. I think, though, I have fun anyway. Mm-hmm. I know that in Wingspan, I might pick a type of bird that just, I'm going to collect these kind of birds, and I never see one because that's just the way it worked out. Mm-hmm. Or in Clank, I put this really cool 2 cards that if I draw them together, it would be amazing, and it never happens.
Yeah.
But I enjoy the game anyway.
Yeah. Okay. You know what it is? I can't switch my brain off sometimes. And Matt really likes
He's just too smart, everybody.
No. It's that it's almost like a spectrum thing, I think. Like, Matt likes to joke about the time. Yeah, have you played a game called Mini Rails? It's like a super.
Yes.
It's not anything. It's just it's a small box forgettable train game with a lot of randomness. But we played that at a con once, and there's not much game to it. But I was stressing so much about looking for the game because it was designed in a way that meant I couldn't quite see that there wasn't a game, and I thought there was, and I was crunching like you would with a heavy Euro. And at the end, I was exhausted by this tiny 30-minute game called Mini Rails because I just worked pointlessly hard and I'd made myself miserable. And that
I just said it was garbage and went on.
Yeah.
It's a 5 out of 10.
Right. So I think when it comes to Clank and Wingspan, when it comes to what I'm putting up a fight against with deck builders is when you have like, oh, which card do you want from a shop? And there's all these cards with all these effects and all this text. That implies that I have to read all that text. Same with Wingspan. You should look at everything all the birds do. And what I hate, and I think this is really why we disagree on this, what I don't like is having to learn and absorb and process information if the game is random in the way that it is with Clank and Wingspan. And that's a problem that I have, but it makes me resent the game like a disproportional amount when it should just be a bit of fun.
I can't argue with that. I mean, I can argue with that, but I don't disagree. I think that's happened to me with games too. I don't know. I mean, each of us has something that maybe annoys us, whether it be Sherlock Holmes or no. I mean, there's just those hangups that you have in the game.
Yeah.
And I was just talking to someone about this the other day. I like to argue about this. I really do. It's fun to argue about games. But in real life, I don't find there to be any use to try to make somebody like a game I like.
Yeah.
When I can easily find a game that we both like.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's fun to disagree when the stakes are low, which they are when you're talking about games that are in the past. I guess it would be, do you find ever that, how do you feel when you're at a table and people disagree with if they think a game is good or bad and you think it's bad or good while you're in the moment? How do you deal with that?
Well, I'm usually just trying to feel everybody out because I like to take everyone's opinions. But let's say it's not a game I'm reviewing. So I bring one of my favorite games and people hate it. I just, inside, I'm feeling that they're just not very good at enjoying games. But, you move on. But it is disappointing. Or in the other way, sometimes I'll feel I'm playing a game and other people are enjoying it. And I'm thinking, what are they seeing in this? But that only lasts a short time. When it's over, I get over it. People like different movies, TV shows than I do. I don't really mind. I think it's okay.
I think it's fun when you and I disagree. Yeah, I actually, this is, I think, why it's so nice to have this chat as opposed to how like gnarly some of our comments got when I published the article before, because I wanted to show people that like, I don't know, disagreements they're not bad. Disagreements are interesting. And like,
I actually think they're more, if we all said a game was great, it would be a boring game to talk about.
I like Pandemic Legacy more because I didn't have the best experience with season 2, because then it gives the whole, like, if all of the game has been like good, it's like, okay, fine. But the fact that season 2, I'm like, no, I don't like this. Let's talk. It gives me some, I don't know, it roots it in my mind more.
Yeah, I guess it is interesting. It is interesting. I'm fascinated by just games in general. I'm fascinated by people's likes and dislikes. I don't understand my kids, the music they listen to at all.
Do you understand the games they like?
They're Euro gamers. What can I do?
Really? Oh no. Do they, when they say Euro gamers, do they like not wanting to, pillory your kids live on Twitch? But your kids don't like Vital Lacerda, do they?
Well, yes, my oldest daughter, she thinks his stuff is great. And so that's why she's no longer at home.
I can't believe it. I can't believe it. Tom, this has been absolutely great. Thank you so much for joining us and for helping me. I would say showing me where I'm wrong, but in reality, just giving me a really nice perspective on a whole bunch of great games. So thank you so much.
Return to favor here in the sense of, I think the show is great. Shut Up and Sit Down has done an amazing job. I remember when we first had you on our podcast a decade ago, and you were like, well, are we allowed to come on? And now I'm like, am I allowed to show up on the Shut Up and Sit Down show?
Well,
How nice for me.
You're going to have me on one of your top 10s, right? You don't know which one.
That's right. Well, we got to figure that out. There's so many. We need, but then I was going to say I have my backup, but I'm pretty sure my people skewer me more than you all ever do.
Oh no! I'll be sure to get them on side. I just need to figure out how. Tom, this has been absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you feel like poking around AwSHUX and seeing all the stuff we've got demoed on our YouTube channel, then that would be cool. Well, I mean, that's a stupid thing to say. You've seen it all. You know everything.
I do not know everything. I told you.
Just before you go, Tom, do you want to tell the people how many games you have ranked and rated on Board Game Geek?
Well, I need to add the ones from this year. I was just that was going to be something I did today. So I'm about 400 games out, but there's 6788. So probably it's going to be 7100.
7,100 games ranked. And on that note, I think we can. I just think that's so impressive. That's so cool. Tom, thank you so much.
Thank you. Had a great time.